This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and today we are going to take a look at 7 potential defensive coordinator candidates for the San Francisco 49ers in 2025. If you can, leave a like, share, and subscribe. On the audio podcasts, go ahead and leave that review. Give us 5 stars. It's the easiest and freest way to help the show out. And to begin the show, I want to discuss what transpired last offseason. The San Francisco 49ers fired Steve Wilks after losing in the Super Bowl. They tried to get Bill Belichick. They tried to get Steve Spagnuolo, Chiefs DC. They even tried to pluck Jeff Ulbrich away from the New York Jets. All of that failed, though. That led them to hiring Nick Sorensen, who, if you can watch this season all over again, it's pretty obvious and pretty clear he's over his head. While there was some good, there were just so much overwhelmingly negative things happening on this defense. Yes, injuries are certainly involved, but bad third down defense, terrible red zone defense, a drop in takeaways, a drop in sacks. It's something that San Francisco desperately had to change when it comes to getting a new defensive coordinator into this team, into this roster in 2025. Thus, I believe the San Francisco 49ers need to find a veteran defensive coordinator, and they cannot risk handing the keys of the defense over to another first-time DC in 2025. So without further ado, here are my 7 top defensive coordinator candidates ranked from 7, the least likely, all the way down to number 1, which is my pick to become the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator in 2025 and hopefully beyond. But I do want to add this. There are 4 potential replacements I believe are not coming. They're not going to get mentioned in the actual top 7. I've heard these names on Twitter, on social media, and I really don't think any of them are viable replacements for Nick Sorensen. The first is Mike Vrabel. I get it. He's a big name, big personality. I wouldn't mind having Vrabel in San Francisco, albeit it would take a schematic change to make that work. But it seems like he's going to the Patriots. They're reportedly already in contract negotiations, so that's not going to happen. The other one is Pete Carroll. It would be interesting to bring Pete back to the Bay after coaching here in the 90s. And obviously being in Seattle for a very long time. I don't see that happening. I feel like Pete wants to be a head coach again. And I think taking a DC role at his age feels less than likely. Then there's Rex Ryan, who I know many people are saying, go get Rex Ryan. He was great with the Jets a long time ago. I don't think Rex wants to coach unless he's a head coach again. He has a pretty good gig at ESPN. I don't think he'll leave that to come to San Francisco to be a defensive coordinator and not be the guy in charge. And arguably, the final kind of, I guess you can say, replacement I'm hearing, but I have no belief he'll ever come to San Francisco. That is Jim Schwartz, the Browns' current defensive coordinator. I love Jim Schwartz. I just don't believe he'll leave Cleveland, where he's already a DC, and come to another team where he'll still be a DC. I think if he leaves Cleveland, it'll be via a firing, which doesn't make sense, or a promotion. Now, you can promote somebody with money in a more grandiose role, but he's already pretty much one of the top dogs in Cleveland, and If things don't go well, I could very easily see them firing Kevin Stefanski next year and James Schwartz becoming the interim head coach during that time. Finally, let's dive into my top 7 defensive coordinator candidates for the San Francisco 49ers in 2025. And starting with number 7, arguably one of the most connected people to Kyle Shanahan, that is former Colts defensive coordinator Gus Bradley. When you talk about Gus Bradley, the first thing that comes to most people's mind is his time in Seattle with Pete Carroll when they created the Legion of Boom. They had so many All-Pros everywhere. It was maybe I could say one of the most well-known defenses, maybe the most famous defense of the last 10 to 15 years or so in the NFL. You can argue that they had about 2 to 3 Hall of Famers on that list, Richard Sherman being one of them. But they had stars everywhere. It got them 1 Super Bowl. Probably should have got them 2 Super Bowls. The defense was that good. They were that loaded. And so there has to be a respect given to Gus Bradley. He runs that cover 3 scheme. He runs that soft zone coverage. He'll utilize cover 2 zone at sometimes. But for Gus Bradley specifically, running the cover 3, despite him being what at one point considered the mastermind of that kind of cover 3 zone coverage scheme, we have seen a drastic dip in production from his defense in recent years. You go to his previous tenure from 2021 up until this past year with the Indianapolis Colts. In points allowed per game, they ranked 29th, 28th, and 24th in back-to-back seasons. Not where you want to be for a team trying to contend for a Super Bowl, and I think that would actually be almost as bad as having Nick Sorensen in the building. Obviously, I think Gus Bradley's a better defensive mind and play caller than Sorensen, but we're trying to get better here, and name value alone and historical pedigree doesn't really mean much to me when in previous years, more recently in previous years, the production just has not been there for a defensive coordinator like Gus Bradley. One other thing that I think many Niner fans will point to and say that is one of the most important areas this defense has to improve is run defense. While the Colts aren't terrible at run defense, they certainly are not great. They aren't bottom 5, but they ranked 24th against the run last year. And I can tell you what, with this team currently, which may change, but currently not having the interior stars to help them stop the run, the last thing you want to do is put a coach in the building that really neglects stopping the run. So I think while there is this admiration for Gus Bradley from Kyle Shanahan, it's the scheme that Shanahan often says was one of the toughest he had to face when he was in Atlanta, Houston, and Cleveland. But that doesn't, again, mean much to me in 2025. And I think it's time to admit that maybe Gus Bradley may have lost his touch, and the way he calls plays and schemes games might be a little outdated for the 2025 NFL season. Moving along to number 6 on my list, one of the more divisive names, if you will, that is former Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. The confusing thing about Anarumo is trying to figure out what exactly went wrong with the Bengals. Obviously, the team rankings, the statistics do not favor him in a role like this for San Francisco, but they've seen such a big personnel change. DJ Reader leaves, their 2 safeties leave, they lose a couple cornerbacks. It just feels like that defense, despite having some small glimpses of life and playing good against the Ravens and others in the AFC North, there really just hasn't been the same level of production from the Bengals defense the past 2 years. So gotta kind of find the balance of, is it a personnel problem, or do you think that Anarumo's scheme should be able to overcome those issues? I'll let you decide. It's still one thing I'm debating in my own head. There is an argument to be made, though, that his performance as DC in 2021 and 2022 was as close to a Steve Spagnuolo run we have seen in recent history. It's very hard to reach the levels of Spags in Kansas City. But what Anarumo did in 2021, helping this Bengals defense get to the Super Bowl and darn near almost winning it at SoFi Stadium, was incredible. While there was a better personnel group in the building, I think we have seen what Anarumo can do when he has stars. Now, maybe you're hesitant to commit to a coach like that, who you're like, well, when the players aren't there, you struggle. When they are there, it's great, but you just want to have more consistency. I totally understand that level of thinking, but I also believe that Anarumo is one of the top-tier play callers and game planners in the NFL. He's a coach that can adapt to any scheme week to week. Doesn't matter who you are playing, he is going to have his scheme in order, if you will. He'll game plan for each opponent and have one of the best game plans put together, which goes back to my very first concern of, was it a game planning issue this past year, or was it because your personnel wasn't able to run the game plan you had in place? That is, I think, one of the biggest knocks on Anarumo, which is why I really just can't shake his last 2 seasons of struggling. But unlike Bradley, Anarumo still shows to be one of the best game planners in football. There's more recent production to buy into, and I think that he is one of the best coaches running the 4-2 scheme that can do it all. The Niners often run a 4-2 scheme. 2 linebackers, 4 down linemen when they run nickel coverage in their base. I think that Anarumo, which there has been no connection to San Francisco just yet, would actually be one of the more underrated signings, albeit comes with a massive question mark next to his name. Moving along to number 5 on my candidate list, it's definitely the most divisive name, I will say, today. He's already in the building currently, and before you turn the video off, stick with me here, hear me out. I get all the drawbacks, I get all the criticism he faces, but Brandon Staley is my number 5 candidate to replace Nick Sorensen as the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator. Again, he's already in-house. He worked with Sorensen last year in what was supposed to be a nickelback role, and if that's all he did, the nickelbacks were really great last year for San Francisco, so it's hard for me to say, well, he did poorly. I don't know what he did. Nobody knows what he did or what he was responsible for last year in San Francisco. I do think there is a connection you can't just erase. That is how much respect Kyle Shanahan has for Brandon Staley. The Rams in 2020 were a highly successful defense with Staley leading the charge. That's why he got that Chargers head coaching job, and I get that tenure didn't go well, didn't end well. His defense drastically fell off during his time with the Chargers, but I think when you take away the responsibility of being a head coach and to say, hey, be a DC, that's the only thing you are going to do, I think Staley could at least be better than Nick Sorensen in 2025, and I put him at 5 simply because I think that he's already in line for an interview. How serious that may be, I don't know. It seems kind of like a courtesy interview, but he's already in the house. If they don't get the next 4 guys on my list, I can see San Francisco saying, look, we'll see how this works out. We'll give him a 2-year deal. We like him enough to keep him in the building. They haven't fired him yet, so I think he'll be there in 2025 no matter what. But I think there is a slight inkling if they don't get the next 4 guys on my list, I could see Brandon Staley just by default becoming the DC in San Francisco.
This episode is brought to you by Unstoppable. Discover the inspiring true story about Anthony Robles, who defied every expectation to become a national wrestling champion in Unstoppable, a new original movie from Amazon MGM Studios and director William Goldenberg, evoking the excitement and camaraderie of classic sports dramas and thrilling wrestling matches. Unstoppable features an all-star ensemble cast, including Jarrell Jerome, Jennifer Lopez, Don Cheadle, Michael Pena, and Bobby Cannavale. Unstoppable is streaming exclusively on Prime Video January 16th.
I could also see Staley wanting to use the DC role as a stepping stone to hopefully becoming a new head coach again in the NFL. I think that's a couple years away, mind you, but I can see him wanting to use a mild promotion as DC as a stepping stone into becoming a head coach once again. Reminder, it's a zone-heavy scheme similar to what San Francisco is already running. He likes to rotate his defensive backs after the snap, wants to trick quarterbacks off their first look, which in theory is kind of cool, kind of nice. You want to have this kind of new age defense, use trickeration, get quarterbacks and make them feel uneasy. When I think of that, I think of Brian Flores with the Vikings. He is bringing looks from every which direction, albeit not to Staley's level. Staley is nowhere near Brian Flores, don't get it twisted. I do think that, in theory, what Staley wants to do is really good. In execution, though, sometimes it lacks, and that's what makes you say, ugh, who exactly are you? Can you actually help this team? He also likes to run 6-man fronts, which inherently isn't too bad, but with the lack of depth San Francisco currently has in San Francisco, or on their defensive line, I don't know if that exactly works, and at times, Staley has been known to overcomplicate his defenses, which sometimes is cool. Sometimes you want to have these complex schemes working and running, but if you listen to how Shanahan talked before 2024, when they brought in Sorensen and promoted him within, it was getting back to basics. Letting our guys read and react, trying not to overcomplicate things. That I think is one of the biggest, I guess you can say, hindrances if Staley does or maybe gets hired, of who exactly are you going to be? Are you going to overcomplicate things and not let Bosa go after the quarterback, or what exactly is your schematic plan here? Which I think that could be a massive drawback to hiring him, or in his case, promoting him from within. Moving along to number 4, and this is where the hate will come in the comments. It'll say, how is he number 4? How is he not number 1? Hear me out. Take a breath, because number 4 is arguably the favorite for the Niners defensive coordinator job this year. In fact, it's already been reported that Robert Saleh has been offered the job via Josina Anderson. Whether that's true or not, we will obviously see if things pan out in that case. But everybody wants to have Robert Saleh come back to San Francisco, be this team's new DC, and lead them, and kind of have this unfinished business mentality coming back to San Francisco for the first time after leaving or getting fired by the New York Jets. He runs that 4-3 scheme in cover 3. It is a return to what has worked almost every single year in San Francisco. I do think bringing back Saleh, well, isn't a bad thing. These top 4 guys are okay, I'm cool with this. I do think there is maybe room to say bringing back Saleh is maybe the too safe of a move. Last year when Shanahan promoted Sorensen, it was getting back to basics after firing Steve Wilks. And Saleh would certainly be the return to basics, and I think in a much better defensive game planning and schematic role for Saleh. I think you would see a vast improvement in play. It is an instant plug-and-play move. It's like going home after winter break. Oh, this feels perfect. It's great. It's awesome. I think they would see a massive improvement in the rushing attack. This past year, Sorensen's defense, for a variety of reasons, gave up 123, just under 124 yards per game. It's not going to cut it. That's really bad. Under Robert Saleh from 2017 through 2020, that includes a terrible 2020 season and 2 rebuilding years from 17 to 18, the Niners defense never gave up over 116 yards per game on the ground. Again, hiring Saleh, rehiring Saleh would be an incredible move, but there are some drawbacks to it. I think that for a person like Saleh, a coach like Saleh, you have to wonder what his feeling is like after being fired by the Jets, albeit the Jets are a massive debacle, kind of a clown franchise currently, with Woody Johnson leading the helm, using Madden ratings to acquire and trade players away, which is just crazy in itself, you have to wonder that he already has interviews lined up with the Jaguars and the Raiders for their head coaching jobs. The odds he would be here for more than one season, it just doesn't feel very high. It feels like it'd be a pit stop on the way to getting another head coaching job in a year or so. He doesn't feel like that long-term option to kind of be here and hold the fort down for the next 5 seasons, then eventually leave. And I think San Francisco could really use some continuity in that room after firing Wilkes and Sorensen the past 2 years. I also think that there is like this big, like massive fear when it comes to trying to rehire Saleh. And that fear isn't inherently because of Saleh himself. The fear is that right now in the offseason, right? Playoffs are currently happening as we speak. San Francisco is in prime position, unlike last offseason, to get their pick of the litter amongst top coordinators on the market, right? They can have anybody they want, or seemingly can have anybody they want. And if they want Saleh, great. But there are so many other, I think, better or similar tiered coordinators that you are not going to have to wait to hear and see if they're going to get hired elsewhere as a head coach. The biggest fear is that San Francisco gets patient and goes, Saleh is our guy. It's who we want to bring back in the building, which is great. But if you get too patient, there is a possibility that they miss out on him if he leaves elsewhere, say goes to Jacksonville or the Raiders. Then we're scrambling to find the next guy because the 3 other candidates ahead of him have already been hired elsewhere. It's not where you want to be. I get it for Saleh. He wants to be a head coach. Awesome. The last thing you can do is be burned by not getting a top-tier defensive coordinator in consecutive seasons. I think San Francisco would be wise to, okay, if Saleh is your guy, great, make him an offer he can't refuse, but knowing that he still wants to be a head coach, don't be afraid to look elsewhere, because I do think there are 3 coordinators that would give San Francisco, 1, better game planning, 2, a more improved scheme to work with, and 3, legitimate continuity that can actually equal that of the Kansas City Chiefs with Reed and Spagnuolo leading the charge of their coaching staffs. The first one I have, or number 3, the first one after Saleh is Jeff Ulbrich. Now, I will solely admit and wholly admit that Robert Saleh, as of right now, is a better defensive coordinator than Jeff Ulbrich. I'm not privy to it's clear as day. Saleh is better, but I do think Ulbrich can give the Niners, again, that continuity that Saleh can't. The Jets last year didn't have a great season, and I think it's unfair to blame one Saleh or Jeff Ulbrich. Woody Johnson is a disaster. Aaron Rodgers had his hands over everything in that building. There were so many things that were going wrong, including what happened with Jeff Ulbrich. He went from defensive coordinator to head coach in seemingly a second. It was like a blind, I was not prepared for this. Thus, I don't want to hold that against him throughout the hiring process. I do think that I believe the Niners are going to target Ulbrich as the backup to Saleh. I think it is let's get one of these Jets guys in here. Obviously, Ulbrich played in San Francisco for a long time in the early 2000s. He runs almost the exact same scheme as Saleh does. There's continuity there. It'd be a plug-and-play, very similar to Saleh. So I think Saleh and Ulbrich become kind of the 1A, 1B for Shanahan and this front office trying to find the next DC. But there is a little bit of context into how you look at the Jets' defense since 2021. I understand a lot of people want to give Saleh credit for what the Jets' defense has become the last few years, and that's certainly fine, but I do think we have to know that Ulbrich has been calling plays in New York since 2021. He has been the one on a play-by-play basis, putting his guys in the right positions to succeed, being the one to, again, go toe-to-toe with your Andy Reids, your John Harbaughs, and every other top-tier head coach, offense coordinator in the AFC. It has been Ulbrich, not Saleh. Now, there's collaboration for sure, but I do want to clarify that when discussing Jeff Ulbrich as my number 3 candidate on my list. His defense in 2022 finished 4th in total defense and in 3rd in 2023 in total defense. So really good top 5 finishes the past, I guess you can say, 2 of the last 3 years as the DC with the Jets. The Jets also allowed a league low of 4.6 yards per play in 2023. Again, I'm trying to erase 2024 from his kind of record book because it's really hard to look at that year and say, what exactly did you do? What didn't work? There were so many things going wrong with the Jets, and I don't think Saleh or Ulbrich deserve that held against them. But with Ulbrich at the top, the Jets were one of the best defenses in football. Again, top 5 in total defense in 22 and 23, and 2023, under 4.6 yards allowed per play. It's really, really good for Ulbrich's resume. The one concern I do have about Saleh and Ulbrich, albeit less with Saleh, more with Ulbrich, is there doesn't seem to be this prioritizing of stopping the run, which makes me a little hesitant to buy into both of them. I can obviously get on board with hiring Saleh again. He's been here before. We've seen it work before. With Ulbrich, there is more of this unknown factor in what he's going to do defensively and how it's going to look like in San Francisco. And I would like to see, hence why I think hiring him makes more sense, is he's not going to jet, no pun intended, for a head coaching job in 2026. I think he'll be here for at least 2 seasons, which I think is what San Francisco wants. The caveat is, though, he's under contract with the Jets. You have to pluck him away from New York, which he may get fired depending on who they hire as their GM and head coach. So he may be one of the options you have to wait out, albeit, again, the Niners have to be proactive. Go out there and find the guys you want. Interview literally everybody. Do not sit on your hands. Do not be patient. Be proactive. Hit the market. Be aggressive. Interview every candidate you can, listen to everybody's opinions and thoughts, and dive headfirst into finding the next great defensive coordinator in San Francisco, which brings me to my top 2. And the next 2 guys are failed head coaches. They are 2 coaches I think are not going to get another shot at being a head coach for at least the next 3 seasons. I think these guys are some of the top-tier defensive minds in the NFL. Thus, I want to introduce you to my number 2 candidate for the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator job in 2025. That is former Indianapolis Colts DC and former and recently fired Chicago Bears head coach Matt Eberflus. He's very similar to the number 1 option I have, although I think a tier below him. If you look at what Eberflus did in Indianapolis, forget the Bears' tenure for a second. We'll get to that in a minute. But if you look at what he did with the Colts, he was phenomenal as their defensive coordinator. And you look at what he took over from Indy to Chicago, that offense was the problem. The offense was the one that wasn't getting the job done with Fields and Badgett, and even this past year with Caleb Williams. The defense was saving a lot of games for the Bears, and even after Eberflus got fired, it was a disaster. But before that, that Bears defense was keeping them in games early on, even in 2024, before he got fired this season. I also think if you're asking, hey, we got to find a better run scheme, a run-defending head coach or defensive coordinator, that is Matt Eberflus. You go all the way back to 2018 with the Colts. His defense finished 9th against the run. In 2019, it finished 5th against the run. In 2020, his defense was the second best unit in football against the run. And in 2021, 11th with the Colts. Getting all the way to 2022, not great. One of the worst in football, but last year when they made it back up and they fixed that defense, got the personnel in the building, ranked first in the league against the run in 2023. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4 of the last 6 years, Matt Eberflus has had a top 10 and really almost top 11 run defense in football. That's incredible. That is a massive improvement over what we've seen in San Francisco since DeMeco Ryans left. And I think when you're talking about continuity, a great run defending defensive coordinator and continuity, Matt Eberflus checks both those boxes. He runs a very balanced 4-2 scheme with the Bears and the Colts that can work in San Francisco to a T. I think, what I love about Eberflus and my number one option is the fact that he doesn't just run cover 3 zone, doesn't run cover 3 man. He does so many other things. He'll run a straight cover 3. He'll run cover 3 zone. He'll run cover 3 man. He'll run cover 2. He'll run cover 2 zone, cover 2 man. He'll do so many different things with his scheme, but it's still very simplistic to a point where, let's say, unlike Brandon Staley, it's not going to be confusing. He's not going to throw this whirlwind of playbooks at you, and it's going to be a very simplistic scheme, but more dynamic than what we've seen in previous years in San Francisco. He also loves, and I love this, he will cater his defensive scheme to his players' strengths. He will put his guys in the right positions week by week. He will say, hey, what works for Evan Anderson? What works for Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Lenore, Mustafa, Hufanga, Greenlaw? He will make sure that his guys are being utilized to their fullest. And I think when you have a defensive coordinator like that wants to maximize everybody, unlike Wilks and unlike Sorensen, those two guys really didn't put their players in position to succeed. It was more of here's the scheme, run it. Eberflus will not do that. It's not going to be that straightforward. He'll say, hey, look, on this play, if that doesn't work for you, put somebody else in there that can run this scheme, this particular play, and can help us out in the long run. I love that. I love a defensive coordinator that can maximize his defense and his players. Some guys aren't strong enough. Some guys' anchor isn't there. Some guys have speed move and swim move and have pass rushing skills. Other guys are a bull rusher. He will utilize his player strengths when it matters most, play in and play out. He also will create brand new game plans week by week, and it shows. There's a reason why the Bears defense was one of the best in football with him at the helm the last few years. And go back to the Colts years, he was a top 5 defensive coordinator in football with Indianapolis throughout his time there. I think when you talk about, what are you looking for in a defensive coordinator? You're looking for someone that can elevate your defense. One problem San Francisco has had is not being able to get over the hump. I'm not sure anybody can do that outside of Kyle Shanahan, but when you plug in one of the best defensive play callers, game planners that can actually go out there and stop the run and put his guys in the right place to succeed, that's only going to help, and I think it'll breed competition. It'll make the offense better, the defense better. It'll bring more people in via free agency, and I think really can help San Francisco in the long run. We've seen this defense last year blow so many late leads, go to the Super Bowl. While the defense played great against Kansas City, late leads up 10, the offense certainly has a lot more blame than the defense does. You have to avoid getting gashed late in games. Eberflus, I think, is a prime candidate to help stop Niners from being gashed late in games. I also think that when you talk about third down conversion rates and blown late game coverages and just a lot of the little mistakes that Sorensen made, not playing 5 down off defensive linemen when the Lions brought in a 6th offensive lineman, Like small stuff like that, where you're like, what is the thinking here? It's not really going to be a problem with Matt Eberflus as your DC, but there is one name I think is better than Matt Eberflus, better suited to be this team's defensive coordinator. And I get it. You're wondering, I think I know who this is, but I guarantee you this man is the man for the job. And if you plug him into San Francisco, you will see maybe a Lombardi trophy. That's how much I believe in this man. Maybe not year one, but he's going to give you the best shot to have continuous success on defense for years to come. My number one, my pick to be the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator in 2025, and hopefully, fingers crossed, beyond, is Dennis Allen, former Raiders head coach, former Saints DC and head coach. He was fired this past year, but I think he brings the best ability to the table for the San Francisco 49ers this season. When I tell you he's one of the best defensive players or defensive play callers in the NFL, I'm not joking. He is head and shoulders, not to the Spagnuolo tier, that's disrespectful to Spags, but you talk about having your defense ready to play, having your defense be one of the main reasons you had the lead, you can contain the lead. Like, go look at the Saints the last couple of years. Their offense is putrid. The defense, though, was one of the best units week in, week out. They were always finding players. They drafted terrible and still found ways to make their defense be a top 10 unit. He runs a 4-2-5 bump coverage. Unfortunately, when you run a 4-2-5, you have 5 defensive backs, 2 linebackers, and 4 defensive linemen, which is similar to what San Francisco runs. He's aggressive in press coverage against receivers, which is good. He's feisty. He wants to make receivers earn every yard. Sometimes it can be a little too grabby, but you'll live with that when your defense is playing that aggressive. Usually when it's a continual aggressiveness, the refs won't call it because that's how you just play. The scheme is really designed to stop the pass, which that's awesome. In a passing league, or at least in previous years a passing league, which is somewhat shifting back to a running league this past year, he wants to stop Mahomes. He wants to stop Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. He wants to be the one to hold these elite quarterbacks in place and say, find somebody else to beat me. You are not going to be the one to beat me. I love that. Now, the one thing that can hold his defense back when you play 5 defensive backs continually in a 4-2-5 bump and run kind of scheme, you will get beat against the run. You're not really giving your defense help. You're having, I guess you can say, a smaller defensive unit out there. You're not kind of filling the trenches up with space and man-eaters. But I do think, funny enough, despite that, the production has actually been pretty good for Dennis Allen's defenses since 2018. Since 2018, against the run, Dennis Allen's defenses, despite running a 4-2-5 defensive scheme, has ranked 4th or better in 4 of the last 6 seasons. It's really impressive. A scheme that really shouldn't be able to stop the run has actually been able to stop the run really well the past half decade or so. But again, that would mean San Francisco would have to improve the defensive line, maybe get a DJ Jones or get some space eaters to fill up the lanes and holes on the defensive line. If you can do that, there really is nothing Dennis Allen's defensive scheme cannot do. He is not afraid to have his defenses get up in the offense's face. He wants his guys to be aggressive, and it's beautiful because the head coach, Kyle Shanahan, will oftentimes let the defense dictate what he does offensively, and there has to be some give and take in that. Dennis Allen is not going to let the offense dictate games for his defense. He wants to make the defenses change what the offenses do. He wants to make his defense alter the opposing offense's game plan and make them change what they had planned coming in to week in and week out games. He also will change his defensive scheme for the opponent. He'll run that 4-2-5. He'll run that 4-3. He'll run quarters defense. He'll run zone coverage. He'll run 2. He'll run man. It doesn't matter. He's going to, like, Robert Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich will run this 4-3 scheme with cover 3 zone. Gus Bradley, same thing. That's great. That can work. Dennis Allen will actively, change his schematic game plan from a 4-2-5 to a 4-3 to a 4-2 to again, cover 3 to the zone to man. He'll do all these different things that will manipulate what opposing offenses can see and will kind of get you away from the comfortability, the familiarity, and sometimes the complacency of a Saleh/Ulbrich defense. Despite how great they can be, Allen just offers so much more from a defensive coach perspective. He also likes to blitz his linebackers. We've heard all year San Francisco isn't aggressive enough. They don't know when to pick and choose when to blitz. They have to find pressure. If you can somehow find Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw and D. Winters back completely healthy, which is a big ask for Greenlaw and sometimes Winters, you got Fred. Allen is not afraid to blitz his linebackers, but the great thing about this is he's not overly aggressive. He's not overly reliant on doing so. He'll blitz them. He'll bring pressure. He will manufacture a defensive back blitz. He'll bring a nickel back, a cornerback, a safety. He'll do all those things, but unlike other defensive coaches, he's not reliant on it to manufacture pressure for him. He also, despite how maybe in-depth his schemes may be, he will not rely on stunts. He's not going to confuse or take away what Nick Bosa can do against the tackle 1v1. He wants his guys to get 1v1s, but he will call stunts when it needs to be called. He's not going to do it too much. Like Steve Wilkes called stunts way too much. There is a balance you have to find between Sorensen of never calling them or Wilkes and always calling them. Allen will give you that balance and give you 10 times the play calling and schematic structure above almost every other coach they've had since DeMeco Ryans, which is only 2 players or only 2 coaches, mind you, but they need something else. They have to find their Steve Spagnuolo. They tried to get Steve Spagnuolo last year. I really believe that Dennis Allen gives the San Francisco 49ers an opportunity to have and find their version of Steve Spagnuolo, to have this almost masterminded defensive pedigree in their coach's room, coaching up Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, leading these all-pros each game, having young players in place, Mustafa, Green, Lenore, Aquanu, the draft class this year, whoever it is, he is going to put every single one of those guys in positions to succeed. And I think we'll be able, when it's all said and done, be able to go toe-to-toe with every other offensive coach he sees. I believe, go back to watch the Saints against the Niners. Dennis Allen is running those schemes in 2021 when they had 9 points. There are so many games where you always point to, wow, the Saints offense really sucks, but their defense is so vaunted, so terrifying. Nobody wanted to play the Saints defense. Even Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, could not beat the Saints defense. They held the GOAT in check almost every single game he played him against with Dennis Allen at the helm. When you talk about trying to find your Steve Spagnuolo, I believe Dennis Allen is that. What he offers you is so vast. It's simple yet complicated. It's complex. It's in-depth. We are not going to let, finally, the opposing offenses dictate what we do defensively. We are going to come out with a game plan and make them change us. That, I think, is what the San Francisco 49ers need in 2025. So to wrap up, my top 7, if you will, rankings are from 7 to 1. Gus Bradley, Lou Anarumo, Brandon Staley, Robert Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich, Matt Eberflus, and number one, my pick to be the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator is Dennis Allen. Everything you want wrapped up in one package. A former failed head coach, a great defensive mind, and somebody that can be here for a long time, give you that continuity, and I think will bring a Spagnuolo-type impact to your defense is Dennis Allen. But tell me down below, who would be your pick to be the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator? Don't forget to leave a like, share, and on the audio podcasting platforms, leave that review. If you kindly could, follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. If you want to go to an NBA game this year, MLB is around the corner, or say you want to go to the Super Bowl or an NFC playoff game, use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49ERS. ACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. You can also go to SportsSpyder.com for your favorite team's latest news, podcasts, and articles. That's all I have for you today. Again, tell me down below your pick to be the San Francisco 49ers new defensive coordinator. And as always, my name is Sterling Bennett. And until next time, stay faithful.